Just to know that like this is happening and then the people are clueless. They have no clue what just happened.
Yeah.
Like they didn't have a clue that the Lord was there, and they probably didn't have a clue of when he left. Like I'm not sure, right? Like,
yeah.
And to me, it is like, again, just to take it back to myself, like I don't want to miss the presence of the Lord.
Yo, welcome back to the Vibes Daily Podcast. It is day 248 of our year-long series we have titled Devoted as we journey through the entire Bible from cover to cover, from Genesis to Revelation. You have joined us here in the book of Ezekiel, and I am back again joined by my wife, Victoria, who's here with us as we continue to make our way through this first week worth of reading. We left off yesterday in chapter 8, and I need to flip my page because I had us in chapter 12 already. But we've left off in chapter 8, where we were getting these visions, specifically as God is showing Ezekiel, kind of taking him to the temple, letting them see what's happening in the temple, some of these practices that were detestable to him. And we pick up in chapter 9, and he's still in this visionary kind of state in this journey where God is continuing to show him something. And he shows them something very interesting in chapter 9. He shows them really this violent, my Bible title is this slaughter, like that's going to take place in Israel or in Jerusalem specifically. And yeah, man, it gets really violent and really gory here. What was interesting to you here in chapter 9?
I think you mentioned it, I think it was yesterday, where you were saying Ezekiel gives us a lot of like what's happening in the spiritual realm here. This is what I love about this chapter and some of the ones coming next is like, first of all, this is like one of the second times we get insight to like the Lord like calling together some people, right? But maybe not the second, maybe there's more. But the first one I thought about was Job, right? When Job, he's like, he called together the sons of man, or and so here we have him calling together some executioners, right? And then this guy going out, this guy in clothed in linen, like pretty much like going out and like putting a mark on foreheads and stuff, all those who don't agree with what's happening, right? Who groan on the Lord's behalf, pretty much.
Who's grieving.
Who's grieving over all the detestable things that they're seeing, right? But then to like everything else, like, and he said to the others, like, go through the city and like start chopping them down, like start killing them. Don't show pity or spare them. And it is kind of like when the Lord says, I'm going to do these things and it's by my hand. Like, yeah, it looks like it's Babylon, right? Or it looks like, oh my goodness, it's the bubonic plague that just, going rampant through the city. Or, oh, for some reason it's just some lion, tigers, and bears that just got loose and came into the city and started wreaking havoc, right? And so, like, you can say, and I mean, it's so like today, you can say that all these things are like, there could be reasons or coincidences, or, oh, it's because of their like elite, like power structure, or how they navigate their army that they won, or whatever you can say. But here it's like a clear direction from the Lord on what is happening, which is crazy to me. So, I mean, the fact that they go out and they slaughter, and like you said, it's pretty much like some massacre that happens here. Was the first thing that stuck out to me. How about you?
Yeah, no, I think definitely just that, like that picture. A friend of mine who, I won't give away all of it because I'm sure he's still working on some ideas here, and I don't want to give all his creative ideas away. But like, who has described like scriptures as, there's kind of entertainment factor to some of this, right? You can very easily see this like formatted or displayed in certain ways that like would be extremely entertaining. Like if you just took out that it was the Bible, right, and you just kind of told this story in any type of like movie or creative way, like I think it would be captivating.
Absolutely.
In a lot of ways. And so it is very interesting to read it because we don't get a whole lot of this in scripture where, like you said, we have this behind the scenes look, it feels like, of what's taking place kind of in the spiritual. But I think the piece that just really stuck out to me more than anything, it really was like the job of this writer, right? This guy who has to go and mark these heads. And like, I think it was encouraging to me that like, again, it goes to God's justice that like he did not necessarily like strike down everyone regardless of where you stood on things, right?
Exactly.
But that he had some mercy for those that also shared his heart towards what was happening, right? That grieved the same things that God grieved. That grieved the same things that grieved the Spirit. And he had mercy on them. And I love that insight, right? Because to your point, it can seem by chance like, okay, whose home was passed over during this, right? Or, when Babylon is sieging, like who actually gets to live and go and enter into the land, right? But we'll see even later, like God even holds Daniel to such a pedestal that like, it's not a coincidence that he's one of the people who gets taken to Babylon, right? But instead it's that like, he is an individual who is favored by the Lord due to sharing the heart of God, right? And so I think for me, again, it was a takeaway that like, again, I'm not assuming that there's nothing for me to do but just grieve, right? I think there's things that God calls us to do to speak up on his behalf and whatnot. But to say that like, I can pursue his heart. And if I pursue his heart, even if I live in a space and a place where others aren't, that God would see that in me is my prayer and my desire. So yeah, that was kind of one of the big things that stuck out to me in this particular thing. But anything else here in 9 as, again, you kind of see that play out with these killings and this slaughter that God is going to ultimately bring on Jerusalem.
Just this last verse. Then the man clothed in linen and carrying writing equipment reported back, I have done all that you commanded me. To me, it just stuck out because it's like, oh, if only we operated like that. Like, if only we operated like they operate in the heavenly places, where like the Lord gives a command and they go and execute exactly the way he asked and comes back like, it's done. Right? Like, and I just feel like if these like angels and these heavenly beings with all these abilities and who stand in the presence of the Lord and just have so much like position, right? Like if they take God's command so seriously and there's no back and forth, there's no procrastination here, right? Like we see them constantly just go out and do the work of the Lord as he's asked them to and report back, it's done. Like, who am I to sit back and be like, oh, I'm gonna think about it?
Yeah.
Like, I'm nervous about this, Lord, so I'm just gonna put this on ice for a little bit. And I'm not sure about doing this that you asked me to do because it's a tall order. You're working on my heart. Yeah. The Lord's working on me. All of the excuses that we have. Yeah. And so to me, it stuck out to me that like he just time and time again we see these angels, they just go out, they do what the Lord says, they report back, done, because he is truly their Lord.
Yes, he's in charge. Because
he truly is king, he's in charge, and they get to see him in all his majesty, and they're like, I'm not messing with that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like you said, it definitely is like the audacity or the, again, just the foolishness of us. And it's the pros and cons of the fact that God has not kind of revealed his full glory to us, right, in his fullness. Because like, yeah, in some ways, man, that's a pro, because we would be terrified.
Yeah, like them Israelites on the mountain.
Yeah, with Moses. Be terrified. We wouldn't do anything. We wouldn't get anything accomplished at all for what he's trying to do here on earth, right? Because we'd just be shaking our boots. But the flip side of that reverence and that fear that we ought to have for the Lord, oftentimes we don't, kind of to the way we should. So, good. Well, That takes us to kind of chapter 10, which again, still continuing this vision. So he's still on this visionary journey. And yeah, now we see something that was referred to in yesterday's reading where God mentioned as he started this journey that, yeah, this is why I have to leave my home. I have to depart from here.
Right.
And so we kind of see that play out in chapter 10 where now his glory is actually leaving the temple as he essentially said it would. What jumped out to you here in chapter 10 as we see that vision?
Yeah, this whole exchange between this man and the linen clothes, these cherubim who they have, what was it, coals or something that these blazing coals from among them that they handed to him and reached out and given to him. But I think the first thing in that exchange, the first thing that stuck out to me was verse 5, where it was like the sound of the cherubim's wings could be heard as far as the outer court. It was like the voice of God Almighty when he speaks.
Yeah.
And because just to couple that with in chapter 9, it said that the Lord had like cried out with like a loud voice, right? Like he cried out loudly amongst them. So I'm just thinking about this roar and this rustle, this boom of his like voice and that of the wings of the cherubim. Yeah.
I think like you said, just anytime we just kind of see this picture, I am struck really just by I don't want to say like the consistency of this, but even like going back to chapter 1, right, where kind of he has his first just encounter with the glory of God and these cherubim and all that kind of stuff, that like, you know, there's a part of me that like wonder, even as I read it that time, is like, okay, is this just a form that God is showing him, or is this like their form, right? And kind of some of these things. But like you see, it's like the same description, right? It's the same. They still got the 4 faces. They got the lion and the eagle and the stuff, right? There's still these wheels, right? And all that kind of stuff. And I don't know, just to see that consistency across it, like in his experience and a different vision and a different exposure to them, I just thought was really interesting to be able to see that. And I thought even for him probably gave him some assurance, right, on like what he saw. Because I really was, even the first time he saw it, I was struck by like how much he was able to write down and remember like what he saw. Zan, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure God would have given me this in that way if he exposed himself this way. But like, I could have very easily been like, look, man, yo, that was crazy. Okay, it was weird. It was mixed with a bunch of different animals and had some wings and stuff. But like, bro, that's all I remember. You know right. You imagine a sketch artist trying to draw my description, it would have been like, yeah, it'd have been real tough because
racy.
I wouldn't have much. But yeah, I don't know. I was just taken back by just kind of the consistency of it. But I also just, to me, also was struck by what seemed like all the effort it took for him to leave.
Yeah.
Like, it didn't seem like this was like a, you know, I'm just leaving the house. It seemed like he had to, like, for lack of a better like illustration, like really pack up and go. You know what I'm saying? Like, that it took like real effort. Like, he had gotten comfortable. This was his home. Like, he had to, you know, when you think about all of, you know, the cherubim, and you said the stuff that is showing up, and I don't know, it just seemed like it took a lot for him to move his glory from there. And then from the threshold, you know, he stopped above, this is verse 18, the glory of the Lord moved away from the threshold of the temple, stopped above the cherubim lifted their wings, and so the cherubim are now ascending from the earth before his eyes. And like, I don't know, it just seemed like this took, like, the fact that we can have 20 something verses of describing what it looked like said to me that it was this big deal that he was moving, and it seemed like there was a lot to it. But
yeah, same. I think I thought about that too, that it was like a process here of him upping and leaving. And then I don't want to move into chapter 11 too much, but then just to know that like this is happening, and then the people are clueless. Like verse 11, like, right, he takes them, chapter 11, he gets taken to this gate, this entrance, and that there were 25 men there, right, and he's naming some people who were there, and and they're wicked, right, and They have no clue
Yeah.
what just happened.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't have a clue that the Lord was there, and they probably didn't have a clue of when he left. Like, I'm not sure, right? Like,
Yeah.
and to me, it is like, again, just to take it back to myself, like, I don't want to miss the presence of the Lord. Like, I don't want to, like, miss him near me, dwelling with me, and I'm just got my back towards him.
Yeah.
You know, and just missing it, the whole thing.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to point out is I think like what you see in 11, because you know we recall these same 25 people kind of from a couple chapters before,
Right?
And that they weren't bowing before the Lord, like they
had their backs to the temple.
Yeah, backs to the temple, and so I think like to me, the reality is they didn't notice because they weren't looking for him.
Ooh,
like,
come on, because he was there.
Yeah, they weren't looking. Like he had been there the whole time, and I think that is so much like our lives, right? God has not really left or moved. It's usually us that is left or moved, and the reason we don't find him is because we just don't seek him. We haven't sought him with our whole heart, right? And so
you're right.
I think that's what definitely stands out is that they missed him for that reason, but. I mean, I did think it was interesting. Like I said, they're calling out this prophecy essentially, or they're creating this illustration of this pot and this meat within the pot, and kind of like using this as this sign that essentially they're going to be okay. I just feel like it's funny that God just kind of like turns it back on him, like, "Oh, you want to be a pot, huh?"
That was so funny to me. He used their own illustration.
Yeah, he's like, "You want to be a pot? You want to be some meat? Okay, cool. Be some pot." Be some meat. I'm gonna add a sword. You know what I'm saying?
Chop.
And like, Marina's judgment upon you as well. And so, and then like, yeah, man, in the instance, essentially, right, verse 13, as while he was still prophesying this, like, Pelatiah, son of Benaiah, dies, right?
Yeah.
And I think like what was interesting, because this kind of to me, I think the second time, and I can't remember where it was before. And maybe this is the first one and I'm just thinking about another one later where, into verse 13, he's like, "Oh Lord, you are bringing the remnant of Israel to an end."
Yeah.
And I think it was interesting that like, you could tell Ezekiel is so caught up in being able to see what's happening that he is so afraid of like this anger and wrath of God that he is just convinced it's not going to end. Right. Cause he can see it. Like he can see that, and he's just like, man, like even the remnant, like you're gonna get rid of because you're so consumed by this anger. He just doesn't realize that God is ultimately going to relent, and it's hard for him to believe that because he sees that side of him. And so it just stuck out to me that like just watching it and just going like, yeah, I don't even understand how you're going to relent and stop, because it feels like you're just going after them.
Yeah, and he's seen the glory of the Lord probably like in all his might, not all his might, but in a piece of his might.
Yeah.
Right. And so I would think if I saw the Lord and all of that, and both start dropping dead, I'm like, oh,
yeah,
it's going down.
Yeah.
Like he don't have to say half a word, and he got all these devourers going out amongst the city. Like I just saw him give orders. Yeah. So yeah, that's crazy. And these people got wings and with eyes all over it.
Yeah, like I said, when you can see that, you see what he's capable of. Like I can understand why he would feel that way. But at the kind of going further into 11, God kind of gives him a little bit of some comfort that like he's not actually getting rid of everyone, right? And that he's not doing that because he kind of says like, hey, these relatives of yours, right? Like they're going to kind of redeem this land, and I will gather you from the people, assemble you from the countries that you've been scattered. I will give you the land, of Israel. This is what he says in verse 17, right? And so like he kind of reminds him that he still does have a remnant, and he still has a plan, and he's still going to be bringing people back at some point. And so, yeah, I appreciate that. Like while Ezekiel is scared and Ezekiel is worried, that ultimately God is still clear, like, yeah, I still have a plan, and I'm still expecting to bring you back. But so anything in particular from that or the rest of 11 that jumped out to you?
Well, the two things here was in verse 16 where he did say like even where they were scattered in the countries that they were at, like he was just like I've been a sanctuary for them, right? That like even in the people that I'm exiling or putting out in different countries, like they'll still have a place with me, which is so crazy to me. That like the Lord's even able to or willing to do that in all these foreign nations, right? Like it's one thing for him to create a nation for himself as Israel and a land for himself in the promised land and having his own rules and his own temple or tabernacle, right? And dwelling there. It's another thing to just say like, hey, I'm going to still meet the people where they at, right? And although his throne might not be there, but at least he in some way in his sanctuary will be there for them. So I think that was really interesting. And then the other thing was in verse 19, just him speaking about like, I will give them integrity of heart and put a new spirit within them, and I will remove their heart of stone from their bodies and give them a heart of flesh. Right, so that they will follow my statutes, keep my ordinances, and practice them. Like they'll be my people, and I will be their God. And that's that line that you always love. But I think it's really interesting that like it's like it feels like he has to do all of it, right? That like he couldn't count on the people to just be have integrity, right? Not just to have integrity, right? Or to have these hearts that you know are soft for others, and for God, like that, like he has to give us that, like give us this integrous heart and give us all that we need to follow him and to follow his rules. And he does that, and he's willing to, just so that he can still be in relationship with us, which is so crazy to me, because at this point, like, they don't deserve any of that. But he's like, it's kind of like how like you disobey, like you're not doing what I asked you to do, you're not doing. It's like, I'm going to do it for you now, just so that I can get the result that I'm looking for, which is relationship.
No, that is crazy. You kind of bring that up, that like, like you said, even their like love and devotion for him is the result of kind of his influence in some ways, right? For them, by giving them this heart of flesh. But that's good. I think the thing that, as you were talking, that was just kind of resonating was that like, when I think of it, you know, the heart of flesh is essentially kind of, it's the muscle. It's what our hearts are already made out of, right? Which we kind of know now. And I'm sure they knew back then too, but like, just that it kind of gives this picture to me of just like our hearts beginning and starting like the right way, right? And pure, right? That like, because we're born with these hearts of flesh per se, correct? But that like it is just over time and over our own actions that they become hardened. And so like it also almost gives me this picture of like not even just a soft heart per se, but almost just a new heart. Like it's just this renewed, fresh and pure, you know, kind of space and place. And so I don't know, just that imagery of it, just seeing that like it's like almost like starting from scratch in a lot of ways, which, you know, I know we get from a few other places that God kind of speaks to, but it's good. But as we've kind of finished out chapter 11, we get God's glory officially leaving Jerusalem as well. So he had kind of left the temple. He's hovering essentially kind of over, and then moves to above the mountain, or stopped on the mountain east of the city. And got Ezekiel's like vision kind of stops at that point, right? Like the vision he has seen kind of leaves him, and he tells everybody about it. Like he goes and tells everybody what he saw at that point. Was there anything else in 11 before we kind of close out on 12 today that you thought was interesting?
No.
Yeah. Okay. Well, chapter 12, we start to see again some other what we call them, some object lessons essentially, or some illustrations that Ezekiel has to give. So he starts here with kind of just giving a picture of what the exile will look like. He has this thing where he has to like dig a hole in the wall and carry this bag, but cover his eyes so he can't see and that kind of thing. And it gives this picture of what the exile will look like. Yeah, some interesting correlations, of course, to what ultimately will happen. But what jumped out to you in chapter 12 as he gives this picture here?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because he gets a set of instructions here, like this first 6 verses, right? And he does it, right? Like he does what he was commanded, and in the daytime he takes his bags out, and in the evening he digs through this wall, right, carrying them. So I guess for verses 1 through 7, describes all of that. But in verse 8, it wasn't until in the morning that the word of the Lord came to him again about like something else, right? And it wasn't like God gave him all of his instructions at once, right? And so it was like, once again, to me, like even just showing just like how Ezekiel and his obedience was very much kind of like the obedience of those heavenly beings, right? Those angels, where it's kind of like he is doing what God is asking him to do.
Yeah.
And he does it even without the next instruction yet.
Yeah.
Right? Or what to do next. Like he just does it. I'm out here, I'm looking crazy, got these bags, whatever. And then then what the Lord wants him to say comes to him, and then that is when he says it, right?
Yeah.
And so I think I just see a lot of what the Lord is desiring of his prophets.
Yeah.
Like his prophets to be operating in that way of like, yes, sir, I'm going to do it. And I don't know what's next actually, but I'm just going to do step 1 and step 2. And then when I get there, I guess you'll tell me what step 3 is.
Yeah. That's a really good call out. I think that's very much a something that we can practically take away kind of in our lives, right? It's just, Charles Stanley used to say like, obey God and leave the consequences to him. Like just obey, just do what he tells you to do and trust him with whatever the next step will be, even if it doesn't make sense. He may reveal it to you as he did to Ezekiel. He may never reveal to you why he asked you to do whatever it was he asked you to do. But I do think that's a good reflection. Like point of reflection is that like, again, can we just follow God's instructions even when we don't have the whole picture, even we don't know? And we like to get the whole picture. Okay, God, tell me how this is gonna work out. Like, okay, you told me to give this money to this person. Are you gonna replace it later? Are you sending a check in the mail? Are you reducing my bill later? Like,
come on, Lord,
help me out. Help me understand the full picture of how this is gonna work out.
Work for me.
Because the way my bills is adding up, I can't afford to give this money the way you just told me to. You know what I'm saying? So like, how is that actually gonna work out? Or like you told me to invite somebody to my home, or you told me to invite somebody to church, or you told me to tell somebody about Jesus, or you told me to go serve at this space and place. And like, we want to know the result. Like, even just like a transparent conversation that like I was having with you and kind of with our board and whatnot, right? Where, my logical brain is like, okay, if we invest in this thing, how do we measure that it was worth it? Like, but it's like, the real question should be like, did God tell us to do this?
In the first place.
If he told us to do it, then we just do it. And we trust him with however that turns out, right?
Yeah,
like,
true.
I think this last story on this, because again, I think it's a good point, that you shared with us was like, when you were at the park and they had the little library thing where you leave a book, take a book type thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Community book.
Yeah, you want to share that story?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so at the park with the kids, they have this little community book thing. We took a bunch of books there that day because I had the kids clearing out that thing. And there was so many books already there that like we couldn't even put our books in there. We just had to like sit on the floor. And so as we're leaving the park, though, I got the kids in. I was looking in the book thing, and I just saw some like postpartum like books in there, and I was like, "Oh, that's cool." Like somebody put some like postpartum books for like the moms who are probably coming with their kids, right? And I was just like, "Oh, maybe I should put my book in here for somebody." I was like, "Yeah, nah, this thing is way too full. Like there ain't no way." And I always keep a couple books in the trunk just in case I like see like a young mom or like with a newborn or something. And so I'm walking to the car and the Lord's just like, put the book in the thing. I'm like, yeah, no. That thing is packed. Like, there's no reason why I should do that at all. And he got put it on my heart. And so by the time I strapped the kids in the car, like, I don't know why you keep asking me to put this book in here. Ain't nobody gonna get it, use it, see it, whatever. It's just too much. And I did. And like you said, a couple weeks later, somebody joined church online. And we were like, who is this person? Like, well, I saw a book in the community library, and kind of traced my name to our church, and then found the link to join us online for our Saturday gathering or Sunday gatherings at this point. And so, but yeah, so it was so cool that like somebody was brought to church by it, and at the time, I had no clue.
Yeah, I said, you may never know who would have picked that book up or what it may have been. And again, we got the insight, which is beautiful, right? Again, as Ezekiel did, you can kind of see where that led. But even if you didn't, the obedience was important. So, I do love that in this story. I think one of the other things that just jumped out to me about it is, of course, just the imagery. Like we have hindsight, so we kind of know that even this like reference to him not being able to see and all this is like really a reference to like what happens to King Zedekiah, which we've talked about. Like King Zedekiah is blinded. He gets taken into Babylon. Never actually gets to see the Babylon and all that kind of stuff. And so like there's this clear alignment with what ultimately will happen to King Zedekiah, and he's kind of given this illustration for it. But I think it's important as we kind of take 12 as a whole. Yeah. It's interesting because the way 12 ends goes back to something I think we talked about yesterday.
Yes.
Right? Which is like when we talked about the doom that was coming, that like Ezekiel's language was different. It was like, it's here.
Yeah.
And some of the reason for that is, as you see, like he had been prophesying and people have been waiting so much that they come up with a phrase and a saying, a proverb. That like Ezekiel's words not coming to pass, right? Like they got this proverb that's like, the days keep passing by and every vision fails. Like Ezekiel keeps saying this stuff is coming, but nothing has come yet. So like, why are we listening to him? To the point that God even has to like emphasize again, oh, word? Okay, it's happening then.
Like, it's happening.
You don't have to wait anymore. Don't even worry about it. Don't worry about it. You ain't gonna have to wait no more.
It'll no longer be delayed.
No, okay. It will happen.
That's just possible though, because I'm like, okay, sure, we'll see about that.
Yeah. And
live like little do they know that and so much more is happening.
Yes.
Or about to happen.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think that was I love that part at the end, just kind of seeing that, and again, just that encouragement to the prophet, right? That like, yeah, it hasn't come to pass, but just standing on what God has said.
And the thing is that part though, is because it keeps saying, oh, these are Ezekiel words, right? That are failing in his visions. And so pretty much in saying that about Ezekiel, you're calling the Lord a lie.
Yeah.
And the Lord's just like, oh, I don't lie. Like, I never lied. My words never fail. From generation to generation, we talk about the Lord's, like, promises, right? Like, he's come through every time. And so, it was like they were literally speaking against the Lord here. Yeah.
Yeah. But like I said, God he's officially said, like, the time is up. Yep. This will happen. And again, we'll get into it a little bit more tomorrow as far as, again, why the people kind of were probably so in between on what to believe and understand. I mean, most of it's their hard hearts. More so, they weren't looking for God. But, there were some conflicting messages that we'll kind of talk about tomorrow. But that brings us to the end of today's reading here at the end of chapter 12. We'll come back and pick up on chapter 13 tomorrow and talk a little bit more about some of what Ezekiel is revealed in his message. But thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you. Hope that, again, that this is helpful to you in your reading. I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow. But until then, take care.
Thank you for joining us for the Vibes Daily Podcast. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or download our favorite, the Vibes Church app. Visit vibes.church/devoted for additional episodes, notes, details, and the latest merch. Join us next time as we continue our journey through the Bible. Take good care.